Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. I always find it a bit funny when I hear people bemoaning that Provincetown has lost its bohemian spirit. In these situations, I think, well, you're probably just not looking in the right places. Or you're just in bed too early nowadays. It is my observation and my experience that Provincetown's bohemian spirit is alive and well, full of abandon, creativity, nonconformism, eclecticism, as well as a good dose of music and dance. I also go to bed too early nowadays to experience this, but I don't doubt the party goes on, even if I'm not there, because there are photos to prove it. There's a photographer out there on the streets of Provincetown working on documenting the creatures who keep the bohemian spirit alive in this town, the Wild West of the East. And this photographer is my guest today. Let's welcome to the Art Colony podcast, Michael Joseph.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
I've been hunting you around for like a year now. Finally got you in the studio. So tell us, who is Michael Joseph?
I am a portrait photographer, more specifically a street portrait photographer. But also I like to think of myself as a storyteller because the portraits that I take as a collection will tell a story of a subculture or a specific place or the people that I find within that place. I grew up outside of New York City in a small town in New Jersey, and my father was in advertising and was also an artist. And my parents took me into New York City all the time to see theater and go to museums, and so that's where my spark of exploring arts came from. But also, when I was growing up, it was we would drive in and go by 42nd Street and see all these interesting people. The culture was very different at the time. There was no Disney and very gritty. And looking out the window, I always think, wow, who are all these people? And so specifically people I would see on the street. And so that's really kind of being very young and interested in people. It kind of sparked me exploring that as an adult and through photography.
Do you remember the first time you picked up a camera?
I do. I was, it's funny because I did every type of art, which would be painting and drawing and, whatever happened to be. And computer graphics actually was, when that was first a thing, right? Like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, those initial versions of that I was super interested in. And I did sculpture, and I was a fine art minor. However, I went through the New England School of Photography, which is in Kenmore Square in Boston, which doesn't exist anymore, sadly. And I remember the intro class, and that was literally the first time I picked up a camera, and it was like magic to me because everything kind of, no joke, like came into focus, and I was able to see differently. What you see through the camera and what you capture is a version of reality, but it's not exactly what you see in front of you. And so that clarity that came when I looked at what I saw, because it was digital, at the time, and I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And so I wanted to be outside. I wanted to walk around. I didn't want to be inside. I didn't want to be in a studio. I took studio portraiture and classes and the setting up and the breaking down. And that wasn't interesting to me. I wanted to explore.
It's funny because I also went to photo school. So what you were just saying made me giggle because, the setting up and breaking down, that takes a lot of time. So you're not one of these kids that, had a camera when you were 5 and started playing with it. This is something you came to later in your, well, not necessarily in your late life, but in your youth. You came to photography later.
Later on, color theory and composition and all of that was embedded, and art history was embedded there. And so it's just another medium to work in and to take off from there. And I think it's worth exploring everything. For me, it wasn't until I picked up the camera and found myself involved in long-term projects that I understood who I was as an artist and what I was after and what it was within me that came out, and how that relates, what you're doing and how that relates to you. And that's really how you find your voice, I think, as an artist. So I thank God for the camera when I picked it up and was able to go out onto the street.
Is there one photo that you took early on that you said, oh my God, this is it. I have to be a photographer?
I've only had 2 very long-term projects. And when I mean long-term, I mean, this the Provincetown project is 8 years now, and my original project, Lost and Found, is was a decade. And so those are really long term. And I work on other things as I go along, street photography and all that. But when you're really embedded and involved in a project, there's an arc to it, right? So the beginning of Lost and Found wasn't really Lost and Found. It was a project I called Close Strangers because I was really interested in photographing people I didn't know, especially people that were um, outside of my circle, not my family, not my friends, but, as we get older, we don't get to meet lots of different people. We kind of get stuck in a circle. And whether it be the place that you live or your socioeconomic status, whatever it happens to be. And so I was really wanting to just meet different interesting types of people all over. So I started with that and then ran into someone in Las Vegas where I just hopped out of a cab. I saw this guy. He looked had an incredibly interesting face and an anchor tattoo on his face. And I wasn't there for photography. I was there with friends, but also I brought all of my photo gear with me, and I planned on staying a little bit longer to shoot. So I got out of the cab and I met him, and we had an interaction for about 10 minutes or so. I made a couple portraits and shook his hand, and I was on my way. And later, when I got back into the cab, we were sitting in traffic, and I was going through the photos, and I looked at that photo, and I said, "Wow, this is a photo." And that was kind of the beginning of that project that pushed me forward. And I was actually at the New England School of Photography at that time in a portraiture class. And I always told the instructor, "Hey, I want to do what we're doing here, but I want to do it on street." And we have a review, and the review went up in front of the class, and that particular photo came up, and there was an audible, gasp about that portrait. The portrait's in black and white, but also in color. It's very stunning. And so that was it. That was the one that really pushed me forward, and almost like an addiction. Like you take one, and then you try to do better and do better and do better and do better, and there are those specific photos that really propel you forward. So yeah.
You mentioned the project Lost and Found a few times already. That project led you to a lot of recognition, publications, awards, so on and so forth. Can you tell us more about this project?
The gentleman that I met on the streets in Las Vegas, his name was Knuckles. That's what he went by. And it wasn't until, I was photographing people on the street that I started to understand there was a youth subculture called travelers who were out and about all up and down the United States, riding by bus, car, but mostly railway. And this was kind of going back to like the days of like the hobo era, the Dust Bowl era, the beatnik era, and then the hippie era. Like you kind of see that evolving through time, and then the punk squatters in the '90s in the East Village in New York City. But this was today's most modern version of that, and this was not something that I understood. It was something that I kind of found myself. Although there was documentation of it, but there was only myself and maybe and another photographer who was working on something simultaneously. So there really are only two extremely large bodies of work that relate to the subculture of travelers. So with this gentleman Knuckles, I started to notice other people, and those people would know who he was because it's a very intricate network um, of kids, I would say, that all know each other, but they spend time together, and then they abandon one another, and then they find each other later down the road. That's part of why I call it Lost and Found, because they're constantly losing and finding one another. But also, when a parent loses something or when you lose something, you go to the Lost and Found in a panic to look for it. And that was kind of the parental side for it. But this subculture is kind of, they're not homeless, they're home free, and they're living on their own terms. And it's a different type of a person. It's a person that says, I'm not fit for what society has to offer me in terms of this specific life, that treadmill that everyone's on. Like you get a good education, you go to college, and then you work really hard to then make money and then have kids. And then those kids go to college and then they get a good education and they do the same thing all over again. So they're really kind of not subscribing to that story. With Knuckles, I then later on, ironically ran into him 3 years later. I didn't know who he was. To be honest, I made his photo in Las Vegas and was ever, after finding him. And then I ran into him on the way to the airport in Chicago, where my the L, you know, the subway, or their version of the subway, stopped, and we had to get off and get on a bus because they were doing work on the tracks. And it was at the Damon stop. I remember very specifically and boldly. And I went down the stairs, and there were two travelers sitting there. And he looks up, and there's the anchor on his face that I remember from Las Vegas. And I said, "Oh my God, like I've been looking for you for all of this time." He jumped up and gave me a hug. You know, the travelers are extremely warm and open hearted, and we reconnected there. And then, but I had to get on the bus to go to the airport because I would have missed my flight. So we took a very quick picture together. And then 3 months later, he was in New York City. So we spent a lot of time in Union Square in New York City together. And then he introduced me to many, many other travelers. And that's when I became really ingrained in the subculture, and they got to know who I was. I got to know who they were. And that was kind of the rocket ship of the takeoff of the rest of the project. I hope that explains it.
Yeah,
It's a lot, you know.
when you look at the project, you really feel that you were very close to them. This was not a situation where you were shooting them from afar. They knew
No.
you were there. They were posing for you. And it's admirable that you were able to develop these close connections. And I was wondering, were you like traveling with them? Were you hopping on the trains with them? To what extent were you embedded with them?
I was definitely not hopping on the trains with them because it's trespassing and a crime. So I didn't want to do that. Although at the end of the project, I promised one traveler that I would go on a short ride with him. To be honest, and unfortunately, he passed away, so it never happened. But I would have because I would have probably asked permission from the train company or the railway to do that for a short period of time. They probably would have been okay with it, I'm gonna guess. However, what happened was I was traveling to many different cities, and the more that I got to know travelers, I would know where they'd be located, and then we would communicate via social media. And so it would be on Facebook Messenger. Instagram really wasn't a way that they communicated as much as Facebook Messenger was at the time because they had groups and they allowed me into their groups, and they would let me know when they were coming through Boston because that's where I live. In New York City, I would know where to find them, and then eventually, as time went on, in any given city, I could find someone specifically that I knew or who knew someone else. And New Orleans, and I went down to New Orleans. Like God knows how many times. Specifically during Halloween, it's when they had their kind of memorials for any of the kids that passed away riding the rails or had any substance abuse issues or mental health issues. There's lots of reasons why the kids would pass away. However, I would go down there with the memorial, help organize a memorial for one of them, and I became ingrained with that. It's the project got ahead of me, so to speak, and
Mhm.
that's when I realized this is not just making photos. This is documentation and storytelling.
We'll get to talk about your Provincetown project a bit further, but one interesting thing about the Lost and Found project is that there's a character in that project that also shows up in the Provincetown project.
That's correct.
So I wonder, do we also find these travelers here in Provincetown?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not so much anymore, but there was maybe a 2 or 3 summers, one in particular, where there were travelers that would find their way up to Provincetown. Believe it or not, there were some that would sail here. There was one girl in particular who I photographed. She was amazing. She was from this area, and then there was a guy named Chad who he lost one of his legs, and he was riding around town, and I recognized them right away. And then being able to recognize them right away, I could walk up and say, "Hey, do you know so and so? Do you know so and so?" Because I was many years into the project at that point, and no one bothered them here, and they welcomed them here, and I believe they were sleeping in the camp or on the beach or wherever they wanted to. So it was, yeah, they were definitely here.
And that character is still here because I saw him just yesterday.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this project led you to a whole lot of exposure, and you also published a book about this project. Tell us more about all of that.
Sure. So it's funny with the exposure has a little bit of a story to it as well, because you have to realize that when you're photographing subculture that isn't seen as much, that there may be someone on the opposite side of that. So you have the child on one side and you have the parent on the other. And CNN contacted me to do a story, and this was a little bit early on in the project, and they wanted to run an online, I think they called it like a lens blog or something like that.
It's like a photo essay slash article.
Yeah, it was online, and they really wanted details, and I had to pull back and actually scale back and tell them you can't write this and you can't write this because I was still really protective over these kids and their stories. But what I didn't realize that once it got published, the parent of one of those kids kind of got exposed because the traveler came from a very like well-to-do town where the father was part of the police squad and the mother was the churchgoer, and they were very conservative, and they were hiding the fact that their child left home to live an alternate lifestyle, and it was devastating for them. But I didn't really think about that too. So the exposure was um, it meant something almost, and you have to be careful with that too. And so anytime this was published, I tried to be very careful about how that story was told, and it taught me a lesson. So the exposure is great, and that's great for um, getting the project out there. But again, I had to kind of scale back on it, and then once it started to be seen more, and then it was up on Instagram, and then the kids would, when they would run into me because my face isn't really anywhere on purpose, they would go, "Oh my god, you're the guy," like, "I'm the guy." And so, like, it became, if you could have a portrait made, that would be great because you became part of the bigger story, and then they didn't really mind to have their story, told in the media. I had a little bit of backlash with the book, believe it or not, and I would kind of anticipate that. The reason being that, they were supposed to be underground or a subculture, and now things were exposed, but the reality was that all the words in that book are their own. And so I had them really telling their own story through their own words. I didn't interject, I didn't interpret. And eventually, when they got the book and read it, they were extremely happy to have a document, because online is great, but you can't hold it and it doesn't sit in the library or in a collection that then becomes part of history. So that really, for me, was the best part about publishing. It just became part of history.
Yeah, I often wonder about that. How will historians in the future document our times when so much of it is digital and ephemeral because it disappears or
Yes.
it gets lost in, when you change computers, you
Yep.
change your account. I wonder, how will they document us in the future?
It's a very good question. I often think about that as
Yeah.
well. You know.
Now, before we go on to other things, I have a really stupid question.
Sure.
But as a photographer, do you also do like assignments for newspapers or weddings or family portraits, or are you just based uniquely on long-term documentary projects?
No, well, I mean, I've done some author photos. Actually, an author in town, Chris Castellani, I did his photos. But generally, it's really my own, fine artwork. So I don't. Weddings are fine, but it's a different
No,
thing.
they're not fine. They're absolute torture.
It is.
Since after I finished photo school, I did 2 weddings, I think, and I just said never again.
Never again.
Ever again.
Also, the stakes are really high. Could you imagine, hitting a button and everything's deleted? I mean, you've lost the wedding.
Mhm.
So, I did do a kind of a shoot for someone, and I left my camera in a cab, and the cab just drove away, and I ended up having to find that camera at the police, through the police. And I got it back, but that's the same scenario where you really lose everything you have. The stakes are incredibly high. So the work for me is more personal, but obviously, I get to share it with everyone else.
Welcome back. A reminder to follow us on Instagram at the Art Colony Podcast. And also, if you would like to help us out, you can do so by going to buymeacoffee.com, look for the Art Colony Podcast, and you can leave us a little tip and help us out, help to keep the show on the air. Thank you to all of those who have donated already. Michael, now we're going to come to Provincetown finally.
Right.
So what's your link with this town? Because you don't live here. Your work is based here, your project is based here, but you don't live here. So what's your link with Provincetown?
Good question. It's funny because I was trying to backtrack and think when the first time I was, like the actual year it was, and I can't really, I would have to ask someone in particular, but I would say my first trip was in 2010. I would say a friend of mine had a rental, and I live in Boston, and he said, "Hey, you'd really love to come and photograph here. Why don't you hop on the ferry?" And he had to give me the directions. Like, I had knew nothing. It was kinda like Miss Richfield says Providencetown, like, it coulda been like that. Like, I coulda said it was Providencetown. I had no idea what Providencetown even was how what it was. And I got on the ferry, and it was, I think, a Wednesday, and I stayed over, maybe it was a Tuesday. Tuesday night, I stayed over, I had a full day, and then I went back. And I went on Commercial Street, and I probably stopped in the taffy shop and went in some of the shops and got a hamburger, and I walked around with my camera, and I photographed some of the buildings, some of the seascapes, and it wasn't really people. I was just kind of like walking and exploring with my camera. And to be honest, I don't get it. I don't get it. So I went home, and he said, "What'd you think? Isn't it amazing?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't understand. He's like, like, well, you really got to go out at night. You got to meet some people. You got to do this. You got to do that. And so, it was, my first impression was not how it should have been, I suppose. But maybe that's how a tourist might see it, right? And what happened, a year later, I went back, with another friend just for the day, and he had some other friends here, and we met, we hung out, and we weren't staying over, it was just a day trip, and we met, a whole bunch of people, stayed in touch, and then a year later, I got a message from one of the people, in that group who said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to occupy one of the rooms in a house. We're getting a house for the summer, or for, a week or 2 in the summer. You should think about joining us." So I did. And I came, and like most people do, with a group of friends initially, and I had a blast. And I really kind of understood what Provincetown was all about. So for me, what I started to learn summer after summer was that, it was free time. It was time to bond with, um, you know, other gay people that you wouldn't normally have that time with, and you're an adult in some ways. But this kind of gets to a little bit of what I start to explore in this project too, is that, when we're young, we don't have that time. We're trying to figure out who we are, and a lot of times we miss out on those bonding experiences. And so this was kind of like my summer camp, in a way. And it was year after year after year. And when I look back at the photos, someone just sent me one of them actually so I could look at it. We went out to Race Point, and we built a big bonfire, and there's 14 of us around there, and the conversations that we had, and the cell phones couldn't get service out there. And so it was a really special time of understanding what it meant to be gay, and what the culture was about, and learning everything. That's the best way I can explain it. So I feel like I grew up in a way, and it was a way of finding myself in a way that was unexpected, and I didn't understand that would happen. And thank God it did. And I feel like that's one of the beautiful things about Provincetown, in just a developmental way. And one of the tenets of the project is about transformation. So for me, it was a very transformative experience to come here. And then obviously I I've been coming here a lot more. I was looking for something new in terms of a new project, and the Lost and Found project became very heavy over time. It was black and white. I wanted something fun and colorful, and I thought maybe Provincetown would be great because I'm close, and it's a place that I love. And let me see what I can find.
And at what point did you decide to do the project in the way it looks now?
Great question. So I was walking down Commercial Street one day, and I was like, I don't know, maybe, maybe not. I saw this little book in a window. Maybe it moved or closed. I don't
Was it
know.
the one by the Crown and Anchor?
Yeah, exactly, across the street
It's
from that.
moved a few houses down. The
Okay, so it was
Provincetown bookstore.
yeah, so it was
Yeah,
the same bookstore,
yeah.
but it moved, and they were having a moving sale, I guess, at the time. And maybe it was 1 or 2 years before then. They were selling everything. And there's a little small book, and it said, Norman Miller's Provincetown, the Wild West of the East. Like, that's odd. And I didn't know that Norman Mailer lived here. I didn't know that he's buried here either. I didn't know why it said the Wild West of the East. So I picked up the little book and I brought it over to Joe's Coffee. I got a coffee and I read the entire thing front to back, the whole thing. I was like, this is a great jumping off point for a project. And there's so much here. And he had 5 tenets, or 5 thoughts about what this town meant to him. And I wondered, similarly to what you said in the introduction, do these exist? And the bohemian artistic quality that you were talking about, like, does that really exist here anymore, or are we past that? So I experimented with many different types of Polaroid cameras, and there's a reason why I chose that. The SX70, which is the typical one that shoots out with the square, and then some of the vintage ones like the 220, or I think it's the 220, or maybe it's the 400, 420, 220, 240. They had so many versions of this, like an accordion style Polaroid camera with pack film. Pack film is essentially you pull it out, you peel it open. The older versions of it, you'd have to coat it. And the rectangular, if you look at old family albums, that's what you would see. These rectangular Polaroids, they faded. That's why you had to coat them, and then something called the Big Shot. So my friend Ben Fredrickson, who's a great photographer, he said, "I think you would love the Big Shot because it's really close, just like you like to make all of your portraits, and it's kind of intimate, and it's fixed, and it's kind of magic." So I tried that one out, and I fell in love with it the minute I opened up the first Polaroid image, and there we are. So I kinda used that book, The Wild West of the East, as a jumping off point, and then did what I always do. I walk around the street, and I introduce myself to people and ask if I can make a portrait of them, and then one step at a time, figure out, who are the people in this town? What are they about? And, why do people come here? What do they find?
We've talked about this before. I was a photographer for a long time too, and that part was my nightmare. Going up to people and say, "Can I take your photo?" For me, that was a huge hurdle. I had so much trouble doing that, going up to strangers and trying to get their picture taken. And because I was uncomfortable, most often it would end up being a very negative encounter. So when I had assignments saying, "Go to nature, work on animals," I was happy because I didn't have to work with people.
Right.
But yeah, how do you approach these people? What do you tell them? So you see someone at a club or on the street and you're interested in taking a photo. Give us your pitch. How do you get that person to pose for you?
Great. So, it's funny because depending on where you are in the project, it changes a little bit. In the beginning, it was like, "Hey, my name's Mike. I'm working on a project. I'm shooting people in Provincetown. I love your look, or I love your face, or I was wondering if you would allow me to make a portrait of you." And when I was originally working with those couple different cameras, it really didn't matter who it was; it just had to be an interesting person. And I was really trying to figure out how to use the cameras. What was this going to look like? Get some type of formulation. Like how is this gonna be? And then once I kind of figured that out, I had a couple, maybe like 10, 12, 15. Then you get to 20, and then you have something to show someone. So um, I would, pick someone based on their expression, their look. If they were exhibiting something that I thought maybe was P Town or Provincetown, and I would just walk right up to them and say hi and shake their hand. And then I would show them a couple examples of what I was doing and say, "Hey, this is a really interesting old Polaroid camera. Do you mind if I make a couple portraits of you?" And I show them this is what it ends up looking like. And then once we started working, we'd peel them open. It was like a combined experience, right? We could both look at it together because I didn't know what was going to pop out and they didn't either as I opened it up in front of them. So this magical moment. And when they saw how colorful it was and how crisp it was too, because this camera makes these really intensely crisp photos. Um, it was exciting. And so I just continued to do that. As time went on and people saw them more and more, I would have people ask me to, make their portrait, which was wonderful. And then as we got along to the mural on the wall and all of that, it became a little bit more well known. And then approaching some of the more well known people in town was not harder, was a little bit of an easier task. But in general, it's really just the confidence of saying, "This is what I'm doing, this is what I'm working on." And what I will say is that if you are a photographer and you're trying to do something exactly like this, once you do get a yes, you can't fumble. You have to know exactly what you're doing, make them feel confident, and be able to use your camera really well. So you're not just just figuring it out, right? So they have to understand that, you really know what you're doing. In the beginning, that's why you have that experimental phase. It doesn't really matter too much, but once you really get going, if you walk up to, a performer on the street and you have 5 minutes, you better know how to nail that shot very quickly, because that's all you're going to get.
You said in passing the mural on the wall.
Sure.
What that refers to is something we talked about in our episode with Alice Gong from 20 Summers, where Michael was one of the resident artists at 20 Summers 2024, that was?
Yes.
In the summer of 2024, where you were commissioned to take over the alley that's next to Marine Specialties
Yes.
and basically cover the whole side of that building with your photos. It was quite the sight. Tell us more about that experience.
Sure. So I was really lucky to be part of 20 Summers, a great organization. And they bring you to Provincetown and put you up for a week. And you do have to come up with a project, essentially. Like, what are you going to do when you're here? And I said, listen, I love public art. Love it. I love street art, public art, all of it. But I've never done it. So one of the things that's really weird about what I do is that I'm doing it in public, right? That alleyway, there's a door that eventually became kind of like my studio, where I would steal people from the street, and it's just white, and I would photograph them against that, and so that alleyway essentially was where a lot of this project was made.
Then it creates this uniformity throughout the project because
Yeah.
almost everybody's photographed with the exact same background.
Similarly,
Yeah.
yeah. Everyone always thinks it's in a studio, but the reality is no, it's not. It's out on the street.
In an alley next to Marine
Next to
Specialties.
Marine Specialties, exactly. Actually, it's funny because I've photographed almost everywhere too. Like I photographed in the A house bathroom, believe it or not.
Some photos have shingles in the back.
To be honest, those are the hardest shots to get because the camera's very wonky. So if you don't line it up just correctly, the shingles get all distorted. So anyway, the white party, I would go to that, and I would go to on an anchor. I've shot like Farla Jean standing on a chair right before her performance, right after, things like that, where you have almost no time. Town Hall was Bianca Del Rio right in front of the curtain. She was fantastic and lovely, by the way. So yeah, so I used that alleyway, and I thought, you know what, it would be great to take everything that I've made here in public and return it to the public, specifically to the Provincetown residents, because it's all of them. It's a gift to them. So I made these extremely large, I think they're 40 by 50 wheat paste posters, and had them made. And then I glued them with the help of a couple of people, specifically Margaret, thank you, glued them to the shingles, to the wall, and it had this interesting pattern that it created. And I didn't know what glue I was going to use. I contacted some street artists and asked them what they use. And so eventually it all went up. It lasted almost a year up there.
Yeah, it
Through the
was there
winter.
for a long time, but
Yeah.
it was also extremely interesting to see the mural, the project changing with time because this was paper.
Yes.
This was going to degrade one way or the other.
One way or the other, yeah.
And it was interesting to see not just how it was changing because of the weather, but also changing because of people were interacting with it.
They were.
Yeah.
I was just praying that it would stay so people could see it, to be honest. But yeah, you know what was really cool about that when I was putting it up? The first one that I put up, someone stopped by and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Wait, hold on," because the plan was all there, right? And I was figuring out as we went along, and that's how things go sometimes. And I was like, "Oh, I'm working on this mural. Like, don't worry about it." And then as more and more and more went up, people would stop and, "Oh my God, this is great. Thank you for doing this." And then I think day 3, a woman baked me cookies and brought them over, and I was like, "This is amazing," And because the town it was before a lot of the tourists arrived. It was really the town. It was in mid-May.
Yeah, because the 20 Summers usually is in the spring. So
Yes.
mid-May to mid-June, basically.
And then as I got all the way to the very end, Ken Folk stopped by and he's like, "What is this? This is incredible." And so it went from a random stranger saying, "What are you doing?" Like, stop graffitiing everywhere.
Mhm.
Like, what are you ruining the building? To, having it at full scale. So it was pretty cool.
But how did
Yeah.
you feel when some people went and they drew on the photos?
Oh my
and
God.
How did
Yeah.
that make you feel?
So I think it was day day 2, maybe the end of day 1, where I literally just pasted it up and I went to go to Spiritus because the only thing that was open at like 9 o'clock when I was finishing up, and, I came back, and within 20 minutes, someone, like, drew a circle on one of them, and I ended up replacing it, but, people were really annoyed, and so everyone who was in that alley kinda protected them as the summer went along, which I thought was pretty cool.
Now, this project, Wild West of the East,
Yes.
is it still going on? Is it something you're still photographing for?
So I'm pretty much done. What again, the other thing is the film, it's pack film, so the pack film is expired, they stopped producing it in 2016. The expiration on it is 2018 or 2019, so it's all expired, and at the time that I was working on it, it was $9 a box, something like that, so every shot would be like, you know, a dollar because there's a flash that comes with it that is also sourced from people's basements and police stations and wherever I can find them on eBay, they sell them through, um, so sourcing all of this, and now since it's so many years, if you can find one that actually will develop and not look yellow or crazy colors or even the chemicals work at all, you're lucky. So I think it's probably like $400 a box now, which means that every shot that you take is $40 if it even comes out. I have a certain amount I can probably burn off just this summer, and then I'm done. I was pretty much done last summer, but there's a couple people here and there that I would love to photograph that I think are important to the community.
What's your website address?
MichaelJosephPhotographics.com. So it's
Okay.
not photography, but
Photographics. So if you
photographics.com.
look at your website, you click on Wild West of the East,
Yes,
there are a lot of pictures
there
because I
are a
was going
lot.
through them today and I was thinking, I'm not in them.
Oh, wow. Okay. I have some film left.
No, it's not a problem. That's just a joke. But yeah, there's a lot of them and a lot of people that we recognize, a lot of people that have been on this podcast, even
Sure.
a lot of
Yeah.
faces that are associated with Provincetown, with Provincetown nightlife.
Sure.
So it is something that really documents these, as I said before, the creatures that keep this bohemian life alive in
Yeah.
Provincetown.
Every single photograph that I made ultimately, and I kind of edited into this collection, is there for a reason, which may not seem very obvious on first glance. What it forced me to do actually was really interesting is go back into the history of queer photography and see like where did that start, and there's many, many references going back, and that's on purpose. So like Hal Fisher's in there, and Bob Miser's in there, and Bridget Berlin is in there, Andy Warhol's in there, Tom of Finland. So I tried to weave those little nuggets in there. James Bidgood, another one, where people. It's funny, people almost use those references and they dress like those references, or they don't understand maybe even where they're coming from, but they're out and alive and right in front of you on the street too. So some of those were very easy to make photos of because they were walking right by you. So there's references there, but also I wanted to take really the town and try and create a sense of the town without seeing it. It's really the people that you're seeing. One of the things that happened during COVID, which is I think year 3 of the project, I'm trying to think, it forced me to do sittings, which I've never really done. And that's because I couldn't approach people on the street because there was no one to approach because everyone was, hiding on the beach or in their homes, whatever happened to be. And so I set up sittings where, I could interact with just one person because I wanted to continue it. So what you start to realize at that time is that it wasn't the town that makes the town itself. And yes, there's, the beautiful sunlight and the quaint houses and the beach and all of that. It's actually the people that make up the town. And that's really the culture and the creativity and the spark and the aliveness and the magic. It's the people. And hopefully you can look at that collection like you're talking about and really see the town in those photographs.
So this project, Wild West of the East, is now going to be turned into a book, right?
That is correct.
Tell us more about
News.
that.
I kind of knew I was getting close to the end of the project, not because it was tiring, but because I feel like I've seen so much of this town, even places that I feel like a lot of um, friends and tourists don't know exist. Like a good example would be like Tasha Hill, right? Someone was took me up. I would didn't photograph it at all. Like that was not my goal, but just to understand and see the history and really examine every little part of the town. once I felt like I really had it and the message I wanted to tell and the story I wanted to tell was there, I thought, I think this is where we are. I mean, one of the most memorable moments was shooting backstage at Showgirls, and Ryan Landry, obviously, he's such a critic, and he's a really wonderful. I love Showgirls. I love him. I love everything he does. And when I first photographed him, I said, "Do you want to be photographed as you or in drag?" And he's like, "Never in drag. I don't want to be photographed in drag." But then I was backstage at Showgirls and I said, "Ryan, Ryan, come on, come on." He was in drag and he's like, "Okay, okay." Like two or three. So he just, "Are you ready?" I'm like, "Yeah." So he turned really quick and I snapped it. And this camera, you have to focus it. You can't just snap it. And the flash went off and I saw it. And then I peeled it right open. And it is a moment of him turning around in drag. And so I was like, this is it. Like, I mean, I have it. So everything after that was icing on the cake. Um, what I wanted to do is really in the same way that Lost and Found became a document, be able to take this era. It was basically 8 years or so, 7, 8 years, because I saw people passing away. Like Sharon from Spiritus Pizza, who was Cookie Mueller's girlfriend, is no longer here. Freddie, who would walk around the streets, no longer here. I was like, this. I need to put this on paper, and so people can have it, and so it can sit there, and become a thing. So I decided to do that. I went around to a lot of publishers and found one that is based out of New York City, MW Editions, who's willing to take a chance, and so we're going to turn it into a book.
And
Yeah,
at the moment, you're running a campaign to get this book published, right?
correct. It's kind of like a pre-order situation through Kickstarter. And the reason we're doing that is kind of to raise more money to make sure that we can get the book made because bookmaking is extremely expensive, specifically now with the cost of paper and tariffs and all those funny things. Um, but it's more so we can make sure that the book will be able to be made in the way that we want it to be made, with really good paper and nice cover, and so it's not just a pamphlet, right? So um, I believe July 14th is the first day we're going to start to run the campaign, and then it'll run through the rest of the summer. There'll be some surprises in there that you can get, potentially a special edition that you can only get pre-order, with some better pictures on it, a little more spicy pictures for people if they want them that Amazon will not carry.
And if our listeners would like to pre order a book, what should they do?
I would love for them to pre-order a book. I would just go to my Instagram handle, which is at Wild West of the East, and there will be a link on there that will link you directly over to exactly the where you need to go to pre-order the book, and whichever version or versions you would like. There'll be some little surprises in there for you.
So, Wild West of the East on Instagram and Michael Joseph Photographics and you can .com,
You got it.
and you can go and see. I mean, there's a lot of pictures there. Are
Yeah.
they all going to be in the book, or is this going to be a selection, an edit?
What's funny is this winter I have binders and binders of these Polaroids because they're
Sounds like Mitt Romney. Binders and
binders,
binders.
binders. They're physical things, right? Like I have all these originals and they're doing great. And I had to go through all of them. And I was like, okay, how many people did I actually photograph? I think it's 450 people. Um, but that's singular people. And then how many shots did I take? And so it's like a lot of photographs. Um, we'll probably be about 150. I can get more. We can get more pre-orders. That means that we can make the book bigger. So that's why we're doing it this way. Once we know what the interest is, then I can get, bigger everything. So please pre-order it. Uh, so yeah, it's probably section it to about 150. And I'm going to try and tell a story about, what my thoughts are on the town, which will generally be extremely positive.
Yeah, I think anyone who has a connection to Provincetown, and especially Provincetown's nightlife,
Hmm.
will find a lot of, I don't know. There's already nostalgia in it. There's already sort of a longing in it, even though it's still going on now, because it has this sort of eternal feel. These are pictures you took at a specific time, but it does have this feel that it's something that will last forever.
Yeah, it's funny because one of Norman Miller's tenants, one of his thoughts is that Provincetown has a haunted feel to it. And every winter, I was here the last Christmas, and walking around. It's very cold, and it's different. You do see ghosts of the summer on the street, and greeting people and saying hello and coming out of tea and all those things that aren't there anymore. And looking through the photographs, it's a similar thing. It's like it has a little bit of that haunted feeling. Like you remember what it was like to be in the heat of the summer, or go to that fashion show, Jimmy Lee, or go to Fag Bash, or yeah, all of those wonderful moments that are very fleeting.
And it's also remembering the people, because there are some people you photographed that were denizens of Provincetown for 5 or 6 years, and now they've moved on. Now
This
they're
is
in San
correct.
Francisco. Now
Yep,
they're somewhere else. But while they were
absolutely.
here, they left an impact.
They did. Yeah.
But they're not here anymore, but they will live through in Provincetown history through your photographs in your book.
Oh yeah. Thank you. And pass it on too. Like everyone, they there's a learning here, right? There's that culture of this is what Provincetown is, and I do see it get passed down from person to person to person, and it's wonderful.
Are there any people that you would have wanted to photograph, but they said no, or you were never able to reach them? Is that a long list or just a few?
It's a few.
Yeah.
There's a couple that I'll probably do this summer if I can get to, just because of timing. If it's a performer, it's they're in drag or out of drag very quickly, or they have just so much time, and I don't want to impede upon their performance. Martina, I would love, if you're listening, uh, to photograph, because I think I have. It's not that I'm trying to get, right? Like, that's not what it is, but eventually when you document, there might be something missing, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's missing, that I would love, and I understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but, that'll be wonderful.
That she's a fantastic performer.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. Anybody else? We have quite a few listeners, so maybe we
Oh,
could reach
shoot.
some here.
Well, reach out. It's funny, at one point, I was going by referral almost. I was like, "Who do you think I need to photograph?" And, like, that led me to Paul Rizzo, who I didn't know. I mean, everyone knows who Paul Rizzo is in the town, but I didn't, because I was
Paul
first.
Rizzo is a local painter who's been asked to be on the podcast. He'll be coming eventually. He's a fantastic artist.
And an amazing person too.
Yes.
So kind. I remember I'm coming in one summer. He's like, "Welcome back. How are you?" And that's what Provincetown is, right? So, it was kind of by referral, and then it was figuring out. One thing I will tell you is, speaking of the book, is obviously not everyone can be in it or will be in it, and there's going to be an editor, and I don't have control over all of that either. Um, but I didn't want it to be a catalog. I don't want to catalog. Okay, this is this type of person and that type of person, and so there was one somewhere where I felt like I was cataloging a little bit, and I had to kinda stop that, and that's when I went back to approaching complete strangers on the street who had nothing. They were just visitors or tourists, or coming up for the day. It was a pride here, and they wanted to visit, and so I just went back to that, to kind of break myself of that mold. So it won't be everyone, and it can't be everyone, but think about when you see the project. I hope people realize that the amount of diversity and the vast array of type of people that come here is enormous, right? We have the rainbow, and it literally is every person in that rainbow. So it is a lot, and you can't do all of it, but hopefully I created that picture.
So if your film is all now expired,
Yeah.
what are you going to do with your beautiful 1 foot long Polaroid camera? Because that's a big thing. It's like a foot and a half long almost.
It is. Oh, that's the other thing too, is that sells the picture a little bit too, because it is nostalgic, the camera itself. Some parents, see it and they point it out to their kid. "Oh my god, we had that," because it was almost like a family camera. They would use it, to shoot each other, and, uh, at home, and yeah, it was like the Polaroid was a family camera, and that's one of the reasons why I chose it too. Um, but yeah, that is almost non-functional at this point. I've been using it, and every year I pray that it's not gonna break. Last summer, at the very end, it was almost breaking. Someone kicked it during carnival, and one of the little knobs popped off, and then there was an older person that hit it with her cane, and then the flash stopped turning, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's over." I have some backups, but you know what's really weird about this particular one is the image that comes out is a little more magnified than all the rest of the cameras, and I don't know why, because it's just plastic, and I can't even use a backup because I think they look a little different. So, whatever once it stops clicking, That's the end of it, but it's pretty much on its last leg.
Yeah, that's interesting because, the camera is also part of the life of the project.
For real.
The
Like it
project's coming
is,
to an
yeah.
end, the camera's coming to
The
an end.
minute the amount of panic, so I hold that thing so tightly. The amount of panic that I have when I see a crowd of people coming that they're gonna just hit it and it's gonna fall to the ground and crash into a million little tiny plastic pieces. Um, it's getting worse and worse every year. So, or a door will smack it or something. I'm just worried that a little something moved and it's not gonna focus anymore. So, but it's fine.
So, Provincetown folks, if you see a guy on the street with a foot-long Polaroid, be careful.
Yeah,
You've been
please.
warned. And so, to support your project, Instagram is Wild West of the East.
Wild West of the East, there will definitely be a link up there. Lots of posts about pre-ordering a book. If you can, that'll be wonderful. And like I said, there'll be some surprises for you to pick up as the summer goes along. Once September rolls around, the campaign will be over, and then hopefully we'll be deep into producing the book. We already are. We've started designing it, but hopefully at that point it'll be pretty close to being done.
Okay, Michael, we're now at the end of the interview, so we have to go through the speed round.
Oh boy,
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Have you been training?
Lay it on me. I've been listening.
Yeah, as you were talking through the interviews, I was thinking, oh, a lot of these questions I probably know the answer already, but it's okay. I'm going to ask them anyways.
Good.
Especially because you said you started with a digital camera. My first
Yeah,
question
yeah.
is, what do you prefer, analog or digital?
Ooh, good question. Almost analog at this point. It's crazy. The digital, I honestly got to the point where I could take 200 pictures of someone in 5 minutes. Like it was that fast on the street. And I would show two images to a friend, a colleague of mine. I'd say, like, which do you think is better, A or B? And they're like, they're the same. Like, are you sure the nose is slightly turned up in this one? Like, they're the same. You're crazy. So it's enough to drive you nuts. The digital camera, is it easier for the sake of not having to carry around all that? And yes, yes. But the analog is so much more magic. It's great. And the pictures are so unique.
Have you ever heard of the Missouri Workshop? The Missouri Workshop is a photo workshop that happens in Missouri. It's
Okay.
through the University of Missouri, and it's by invitation only. So you get nominated through photo editors or whatever, and you get sent into a small town in Missouri. It's a different small town every year, and you're paired up with photo editors or
Mm-hmm.
big name photographers. I had Maggie Sieber as
Mm-hmm.
my person, and
Great.
I was in
I
Platt
learned a
City.
good lesson. I learned a good lesson from her.
I was in Platt City, Missouri, and the trick is you're dropped in this city.
Yeah.
On day one, you have to roam the city and try to find a story, and then you have to pitch the story to your editors. And during the whole week, you're only allowed 400 photos.
Oh boy.
And as you were saying, with the
Yeah.
digital camera, I was used back then as a assignment photographer, and one day I'd take a couple thousand photos. But during the whole week, you're only allowed 400 photos. And if you hit your button by mistake, sorry, that's
Yep.
one frame that's gone. So that really trained me to
Yes.
stop, think, train my eye to really get the shot instead of just
Yeah.
pushing the camera and hoping it's going to be in the can.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good lesson for me, the Missouri Workshop.
Great. A mentor of mine once said, stick with one camera for a long period of time. Don't keep going around, and then really know what you're doing with that. One thing about when I was shooting Bianca Del Rio, I knew that I would have probably 2 minutes, and I tried to push for like 5, but I didn't know, the film. I took a couple just to make sure the color was going to come out because it's expired, and it's one of those moments, and you're like, you're never going to get this again. You better nail it, and that's what film is all about.
Then I have a photographer who shows in my gallery,
Yeah.
also with Polaroid,
Yeah,
Ryan Rudowitz.
great.
He's going to be showing in my gallery in the second half of August this year. He's going to have a show by himself right
Wonderful.
the Friday of Carnival. We're going to open the show. And then the week after, it's going to be Ryan and his friends from Brooklyn. So if you want to
Great.
see a Polaroid show at Studio Lacombe, Ryan Rudowitz, also known as Rude Polaroids, coming up for the 4th year.
Awesome.
Anyways, I have to do my pitches. Second question. And there also, you already talked about this, but let's see what you say.
Oh,
Do you prefer photo books or framed photo prints?
I mean, for me, the book, I would
Yeah.
say, yeah. There's just even if they're small too, because there's an intention with how they were arranged, the story they're trying to tell, whether they're small, large, bleeds, series, I've even seen, black and white and color mixed, with which creates intention. So the photo book is a different way of like a full expression. So for me, yes,
Are you a photo book collector?
I am.
Yeah.
I have too many, especially for this project. I was just collecting more and more. There's some really unbelievable queer photo books out there.
When I lived in DC and worked as a photographer, I was very much involved with the National Geographic Circle, and I
That's
did
right.
some small projects with them.
Yeah.
There was an editor there called Gina Martin,
Hmm.
and you went to her apartment, and every single wall was covered in photo books. She had
Hmm.
thousands of photo books. So pretty much any photo book you wanted, she had it somewhere.
Wow.
And they were arranged by color.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was interesting. Okay, next question. Daytime photography or nighttime photography?
Well, for me, mostly I use natural light, so definitely daytime. But then with the Polaroid, it's all flash, so it wouldn't really matter, to be honest. I don't know. It's funny because I'm trying to formulate another project, kind of, and it may be a nighttime scenario. So we'll have to see.
Okay, we'll have to stay tuned.
Yes.
Do you prefer photographing during Carnival Week or Spooky Bear Weekend?
Oh, Carnival.
Carnival, yeah.
Yeah. This is another interesting thing. It's like Carnival, any parade, the beginning of but before the parade and after the parade are the best times to get the photos. The reason is that before people are getting ready, they have lots of energy and things are kind of like, the looks are half there, they're not sure, the attention is there, right? And then after the parade, everyone is just had the best time of their life. And then the look, instead of being half there, is like now half off. Right? So the makeup is smeared, there's sweat or rain or whatever happens to be. And you get a whole different type of expression there. So one of my most favorite photographs was taken right before Carnival started. So Teddy was one of the Summer of Sass kids, and he was dressing up in drag, which was not his usual, but it was kind of half on, half off, and he was smoking a cigarette. And I walked right up to him before everyone was kind of coming out to the streets a little bit. And oh, can I photograph you? 3, 1, opened it up, magic, and that was it. So
And I think when we go on your website, it's the first photo, right?
it is the first photo. Yeah,
And if you want to learn more about the Summer of Sass, go back to my episode with Kristen Becker. We talk about her project, the Summer of Sass. It's a fantastic
Yeah.
project.
it really is.
So now, last question. This is almost the most controversial, the most difficult question. Ranch dressing or barbecue sauce?
For me, barbecue sauce.
Barbecue sauce.
Yeah, you put on anything.
Okay.
Yeah, why not?
I would have a lot of trouble choosing. Yeah.
I like
need
a
them both.
barbecue burger, ribs,
Uh-huh.
fries and barbecue sauce are good.
Well, that's good too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So definitely barbecue sauce.
Okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we're now at the end of the interview. So let's, one more time, remind people of your website.
Sure, it's Michael Joseph Photographics .com, not photography, but photographics.com. And then actually I have 2 Instagram handles. At Michael Joseph Photo is the one where you'll see Lost and Found mostly, but the Provincetown one is at Wild West of the East, which is essentially the name of the project.
That's also where people can go to help support your book of photos of Provincetown that we've been talking about for the last half hour.
Exactly.
And I think it's a really worth project. I think this will be a fantastic book. I can't wait to get my copy. So, Michael Joseph, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I think the work you do here in town is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
It's beautiful, and I
you.
hope a lot more people will be seeking it out now.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.